So, hello and welcome. Big crowd today. But it'll be good. We'll have a nice, more intimate get-together here, which would be great. So, first introductions. I'm John O'Dell. I'm the Energy and Asset Director for the City of Worcester. Luba Zarova works with me as our Sustainability Manager. And we have a consultant who we're working with, Mass Power Choice, who basically is spearheading the aggregation. And we have Paul Gromer here from them, who will be speaking to you, will be walking you through the slides here, and then at the end answering any questions he or I may have for us regarding the program, and we can hopefully answer every question that you have, and we'll go forward from there. So without further ado, Paul.
Thanks, John. So, as John said, the goal for tonight is just to go through a brief presentation and then mostly to answer questions if you have them. And we can go right to the first slide. So, what is an aggregation program? Aggregation is a form of group electricity purchasing in which a city selects an energy supplier for the community. It affects only a portion of your national grid bill, the supply services part of the bill. This is something that about 150 cities and towns in Massachusetts are already doing, and Worcester is starting it up now. So what are the goals of the program? The first is that we'll increase the amount of renewable energy in the electricity supply and thereby reduce Worcester's carbon footprint. It will also provide stable electricity prices. So electricity prices, if you're on National Grid Basic Service, the price changes every 6 months. The city has locked into a price that will be the same for 34 months. And then finally, it's a program with strong consumer protections. And this is in comparison to the competitive supply offers that you might get from folks who call on the phone all the time. Often those offers seem to be too good to be true, and they really are. They'll often start with a low rate, which will rise up after a few months, or they have hidden charges as part of them, or they lock you in for a term. The city program doesn't have any of those things. It's very consumer friendly, and it's designed and vetted by the city to be good for the residents. One thing that I should say as a disclaimer is that the cities can, and we'll get to this again too, is that the city's goal is to have a price that's not only stable, but is the same or lower than the national grid price over the term of the contract. But because the national grid price changes every 6 months, the city can't promise the future. It can't promise that it will be lower, but that's the city's expectation. So how does the program help to reduce Worcester's greenhouse gas footprint? So one of the great things about the program is that it will at least double the amount of renewable electricity that's in the electricity supply for the participants of the program. And by renewable electricity, we mean electricity that's generated by the wind or by the sun, as compared to electricity that's generated by burning oil or natural gas or coal. So much better for the environment, and it reduces the greenhouse gas footprint. We see in the table there the amount of renewable energy that will be in the Wooster program each year, and then next to it the state minimum. So the state minimum goes up by 2% every year, and so the Worcester's percentage of renewables will also go up 2% a year along with that, from 36% at the start up to 40% by the end. And so the next thing we have, as we talked before, is we'll have stable electricity prices and prices that are lower than the national grid prices, certainly at least at the start. And there are two options within the Wooster program. There's the standard, which is over there on the left, which has 20% more renewable energy than the state minimum, which we were talking before. Then there's the 100% green option, which is an optional product for those who wish to choose it. And that, as the name suggests, has 100% renewable energy. And then all the way on the right is the National Grid Basic Service, which has just the minimum amount of renewable energy. And importantly, the same disclaimer I mentioned before. It's very important to the state that we say this, so we'll say it not just once, but twice. The city's guaranteed a price in place for 34 months, but it can't guarantee that it will be lower than the national grid price, because the national grid price changes every 6 months, and we don't know for sure what it will be 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now. The city's expectation is that their price will be the same or lower, but it can't promise that 100% for sure. So what are the consumer protections? We talked about these a little bit before. It's a city-vetted contract. It's consumer-friendly. One of the key aspects of it is that residents or participants can leave the program at any time, and there's never any fee for leaving. This is a big difference from many of the competitive offers we talked about before that you get over the phone or sometimes through the mail. And also, there are no hidden fees or costs as part of the Wooster program. So one of the great things about a program like this is that really not all that much changes as far as the individual's experience or electricity service is concerned. You don't have to pay another bill, for example. You still continue to get one bill from National Grid, pay it just the same way that you did before. The city program is just one line on that bill. You will see two changes really on the bill. They're both in the supplier services section. One is that the name of your supplier will change from basic service to the Wooster program, the Direct Energy Wooster program. And then secondly, you'll get the price of the Wooster program rather than the National Grid basic service price. And then what won't change is most things. So you continue to get your bill from National Grid, you continue to pay National Grid, you call National Grid if the power goes out, and you continue to be eligible for all the discounts and programs you were eligible for before. So low-income discounts stay in place, budget billing stays in place, net metering works the same way if you have solar panels, and you're still eligible for the energy efficiency programs in the same way. How does this work? This is the most unusual thing about this program, which is that it's an automatic enrollment program. So if you're on National Grid Basic Service now, you become part of this program automatically unless you say you don't want to be part of it. That's an unusual thing, that it's that you have to say no rather than say yes. But that's the way this program is set up under state law, and Worcester's just following the state law in setting up their program this way. The automatic enrollment will take place in February, which means you would see it in your National Grid bills in March. And that's because the bills look backwards. The bill you get in March would be for service from February to March, and that would be your first month in the program. Now, one exception to this automatic enrollment part, which is that if you already have a contract with an electricity supplier, you won't be automatically enrolled in the city program. You're welcome to join it, but then you have to join. You have to call and say you want to be part of it. You don't become part of it automatically. And key thing is, although it's automatic enrollment, you don't have to participate. It's easy to what's called opt out of the program. You can do it by returning a card that would have come in the mail with your letter explaining the program. You can do it on the program website, or you can do it by calling customer support. And you can opt out before the program begins, or you can opt out anytime after the program begins. You can opt out at any time, and there's never a fee for opting out. So a lot of the questions we get a lot are, first, I have solar panels on my roof, I have net metering credits, does that change? The answer to that is no. We continue to get net metering credits. Those credits are still calculated in the same way they are now. The next question is some people who don't have solar panels on their roof, but they've signed up for a community solar program, and they ask if that changes. And the answer to that is no. That continues to operate the same way it works now, continue to pay for that the way you do now, continue to get credits the way you do now. And then finally, sometimes people say we're part of the National Grid Green Up program, which is a voluntary program through National Grid. Can you be in that and the Wooster program? And the answer to that one is no, you can't be in both. You can be in either one, but if you're in Green Up, you can't be in the Wooster aggregation. And that's not because of the aggregation, but that's National Grid's rules, that you have to be in one of those or the other, but you can't be in both. And then here's information, ways to get more information. There's the website and the customer support number there, the customer support email. But mostly the way to get more information is just to ask any questions you have now, and I'll answer them, or John will answer them for you, or Luba will answer them for you. And that's really why we're here tonight, is just to answer your questions. That's it for the presentation part of the evening.
Always for me. So any questions? Yes.
I don't know that I need that.
Well,
Yeah. Can you explain, is it direct energy that identifies the sources of energy, the suppliers that you use, or is it the city? And is it possible to identify suppliers that you would like to be included in the aggregation program?
Yes, so that's a great question, and if to answer it, I'll talk a little bit about how the electric market works and who does what. So, Direct Energy, is what's called a retail supplier. So they purchase electricity at wholesale and then resell it through the program at retail. Most of the electricity they buy is just generic electricity through a wholesale market, not tied to specific power plants. They're buying out of a pool. But for the renewable portion of the program, the city has specified what it wants. So the city has said that the renewable energy has to be what's called Massachusetts Class 1 renewables. So that means that it has to be from new projects and be from sources that the state has certified as being qualifying for the renewable portfolio standards, such as wind and solar and things like that. So that's the city's primary specification, which is Massachusetts Class 1 for the renewable part. And the other part, this part that's not renewable, is really, in the RPS world, generic, which means it just gets assigned like sort of the average profile of electricity in New England. Does that answer your question, or I bet you had an even more pointed question in there that I didn't answer.
So I don't know how the programs that meet the standard. I'm still a little vague about. I mean, I know that you're not actually getting electrons. You're trading credits. So I'm confused by that, and I'm sure that other people are probably not interested. But it's. I'm just wondering if there were like a community solar project that is that has extra energy. Could that be integrated into the program?
Yes, it definitely could. So. The Direct Energy can, through this, buy electricity from specific units if that's available and if it works out for the city. And I know, for example, I know there's some solar projects here in Worcester, and I think there's some conversations about maybe how those could be brought into the program. The general way it works, though, which is confusing for you and it's confusing for everybody, so you're not alone in that notion, is that the way electricity works is it's a little bit like a reservoir. So you've got a bunch of streams that feed a reservoir, but then when water comes out of your faucet, you don't know which stream it came from, right? Because it went into the big pool first. So electricity works the same way, and except instead of streams, you have power plants, and some of them burn coal, and some of them are from the wind. And the way these credits work is that they keep track of who put electricity into the grid. So it's not what comes out, but who puts it in. And to be Class 1, to be a power plant that meets the Class 1 standards, you have to meet the state legislative standards, statutory standards for Class 1. So that means built after a certain year, and you use certain technologies like wind, like solar, and not other technologies like giant hydroelectricity or nuclear or coal or natural gas.
So conceivably, you could have like a bunch of 25 kilowatt solar projects that could be included in that supply with those little tiny power generators, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely that could happen. It could be done that way. Sir?
The price launch for the 34 months, is that for both the standard and 100% green price? Or is that just for the standard price?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
You said the price lock was for 34 months. Is that for both the standard price and 100% green price?
Yes, the price lock is for both the standard and the 100% green. The price is for both, it's locked for the 34 months.
Sure.
I guess
Your voice is good. Yep, Gary.
Well, it has to be on camera, the recording.
Okay.
Sure. Play it safe.
All right, thank you. So, could you just explain real quick how you can offer rates below basic service?
Yes, so that's a really good question, is how does this whole thing work? So how can the city provide a price that's lower than basic service, but has more renewable energy in it when renewable energy costs extra? So how does that work? So the way it works is that there are a couple of factors that come into play. The biggest one is that when the utilities go out to buy electricity for basic service, they're stuck into a regulatory determined schedule. They have to buy electricity every 6 months, and it's the same time, like twice a year, they have to do it, and they can't vary. And they also can't vary the term that they're buying electricity for. So both when they buy and for how long they buy is set. They've got no flexibility. But when a city chooses a supplier for an aggregation, the city has a lot of flexibility. So it can decide when to start, so it could choose a good time to do it, a time prices are low. And then it can also choose a period, a contract term where prices seem to be the best. So when Wooster went out to bid, for example, Wooster was able to do it at a good time, which is in the fall, before the prices start to go up for the winter. And then Wooster was able to get bids for a variety of terms, and Worcester could see, well, if we buy electricity for just 1 year, it's pretty expensive. But if we buy electricity for 2 years, it's a little less. And if we buy it for almost 3, it's a little less. So Worcester could use the flexibility they have to get a better price. The other advantage, I think, is that there's a little bit more competition for suppliers who want to supply aggregations than there is for basic service now. So the city benefits from some competitive pressures that keep the price low. Did you have another question before? Here, use this, because you have to be heard on the recording.
Okay. I saw there was no penalty for opting out at any time. Does that include after the 34-month period for the price lock?
Yes. So there's no penalty there's no penalty for opting out. We're only actually talking about for the 34-month period for the program, because the programs are only fixed for the 34 months, but I'm sure if the city chooses to continue the program after the 34 months, they would continue the policy that anybody could opt out at any time with no fee. What happens at the end of 34 months is, or when we get close to that, the city will go out to bid again and try to get other bids from suppliers, and if it gets another good price, imagine the city would continue the program along. But if it doesn't, the city's free at that point to end the program, and everybody just goes back to basic service where they were before.
If you don't mind, we had one information session already at the senior center, and there were a couple of questions that were asked then that I think would be useful to answer now as well. So on behalf of the residents, one question is, did we vet the suppliers, and how do we know that this is a reputable supplier?
So that's a great question, and the answer is that we as the consultants for the firm, for the city, reviewed all of the potential bidders and gave the city an analysis identifying the strengths and weaknesses of the potential bidders. But mostly we took bids only from suppliers who are licensed by the state to provide this service, and also firms that have experience supplying other aggregations in Massachusetts. We only looked at firms that were experienced. It turned out that the one the city chose is the one that's serving the most communities of anybody right now. So they're the biggest company. They're a huge company, number one, but they're also the biggest in the Massachusetts aggregation market. So there's someone who's pretty big and pretty stable. There's just a giant company.
Thank you. Another question, can someone opt into aggregation after having opted out?
So the answer to that is, can you opt in if, say, you decide to opt out now, and then sometime down the road you say, well, I'd really like to be part of this, can I join the program then? The answer to that is you're always welcome to join. You can always join at any time. But you're not guaranteed that you're going to get that, so these prices up on the screen there if you opt out and then you try to opt back in later. Probably you will be, but the reason it's not guaranteed is just to protect against having, if thousands and thousands of people decided to be in the program at the time the basic service prices were high, but then out of the program when basic services prices were low, and went in and out, that would undermine the program and make it kind of unviable economically. So to protect against that, it's not a guarantee that you would get the program price if you opt out and then opt in later. If it's only a handful of people, you will. But if it's thousands and thousands, probably not.
And just for reference, there's about 60,000 people accounts that are being brought into the aggregation. So just for scale, if you can see that it would take an awful lot to tip that balance. Any other questions from the audience?
One question from last time from the Senior Center presentation that I think it might be good to talk about is, why is Wooster doing this, and why is Wooster doing this now? And I don't know, John, if you want to talk to that.
Sure. There are two primary reasons. The first is, as Paul mentioned, is as you know, as you just heard, there's a lot of folks being solicited from other companies for their supply service. Some of these companies have sort of a method that is less than ideal, I would say, in terms of being consumer friendly. And so we are concerned about that. People are often, you get the solicitation on the phone or in the mail, but even door to door, where people are asked to look at their bill, they take a picture of the bill and they switch them over to another supplier, which really is a big issue. In fact, the district attorney for the state has noted that this is a big issue, that the deregulation of the market hasn't worked as intended at this point, which was done about 20 years ago, and that the suggestion is one of the best ways to combat that for any community is to invest in an aggregation, which is partly one of the reasons why we wanted to do this. The other big reason, of course, is climate change. So climate change is real. I think no one here is are going to argue that, but it is real, and this allows us to do something substantial on one fell swoop, which is double the amount, at least double the amount of green electricity across 60,000 accounts. That actually has a measurable impact in terms of how we deal with it here in the city. So we thought that between those two reasons, and we're even able to keep prices, as Paul mentioned, not a guarantee, but to keep prices similar to what they are now, maybe improve upon them, maybe not, but hopefully we will, and yet add the green component in as well. Why wouldn't we do it? We'd be crazy not to. So those were the two primary reasons. I should also add that we resisted doing this for a long time. The option to do aggregation has been around essentially since deregulation came into play back in 1999. We didn't move forward on this because of two things. One, the marketplace was not saturated with these other vendors who were targeting individuals, and so we just didn't have the push to move forward in terms of protecting consumers. There just wasn't enough of a play in the marketplace to make that a high priority. It happened very, very infrequently. So because of that, and because the green component wasn't a major issue at that point either in terms of getting it for a price that we could make viable, we didn't pursue. And there's a lot of logistical hurdles to go through this. This is not a light undertaking. It's a big deal. And so for all those reasons, the administrative hassles, for all that, we resisted that. But now, for the two reasons primarily I mentioned to you before, we decided that this was an opportune time to move forward where we can make an impact in both those areas, particularly regarding the climate change issue. All right. Well, that was awesome. And well done us. It's not even 6 o'clock. So thank you very much for coming out on a cold and miserable weather to come out and participate in this. If you're like me, if you have any questions that come up on your drive home, walk home as you head out, you can certainly call the support line or the email or website and get in touch with us or someone affiliated with the program and answer any questions you might have. We're here to help, as it were. We're from the government. We're here to help. Wait, can you edit that? Edit that. No, I'm kidding. That's the camera. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Thank you guys for coming, and enjoy the aggregation.